If you want to upgrade your grill game this year and you've only got $500, Kamado Joe has two products that might just be the perfect fit for you. The Kamado Joe Kettle Joe as well as the Kamado Joe Jr. Today, we're putting them head to head to find out which one deserves your 500 bucks. Hey, I'm James from Smoking Dad Barbecue, and I am so excited to share today's video with you. Ever since the Kamado Joe Kettle Joe arrived, you guys have been asking in the comments, James, I have 500 bucks. Which one should I get? The Kamado Joe Kettle Joe at $4.99 or the Kamado Joe Jr at $3.99? And now that I've got plenty of cooks under the belt on both grills, I'm able to share some pros, some cons, as well as a recommendation of which one I'd get if I could only pick one. Let's get started. Okay, so let's start things off with the Joe Jr. So I'll just give you a quick overview of each grill as well as what's included in the box and show you some of the different setups that you can do with each grill. So getting started with the Joe Jr., this used to be the lowest cost per square inch of anything in Kamado Joe's lineup. So you get 148 square inches of cooking space on the stock cooking grid. You can add a little bit more with some extra aftermarket accessories. And so that works out to about $2.60 per square inch of grill space. And so definitely one of the most affordable ways to get into the Kamado Joe lineup until this year. More on that a little bit later. In terms of its size, so you're about 27 inches from the ground to the top. It is portable at 68 pounds. It's not lightweight, but it's definitely something that you can move around. Not that I want to do this all day, but it's possible. So what's included with the Joe Jr.? So as you saw in the quick little portability demonstration, you get this portable nest and carrying cart, which allows you to move it place to place. And I'm a big fan of this because I found not only is it nice and stable and secure for carrying, it also has great height. If you're taking this on a picnic table or something like that, you're not going to burn whatever surface is underneath. So I'm a really big fan of the carrying cart for the Joe Jr. You also get included a set of grill grippers for moving any hot cooking grids around, as well as an ash tool for raking out some of those ashes that accumulate in the bottom of your Joe Jr. Inside, when you open it up, you'll find your cooking grid, which has a little hinge system that allows you to drop in some more charcoal or smoking wood if you were cooking direct. You also get your accessory rack, which is great for a couple things. So you can put in a heat deflector plate on there and cook indirect. You can also slide in a drip tray accessory on top of that if you wanted to be able to catch your drippings. And then it holds your cooking grid. So you can either go with the stock cooking grid, or I'll show quickly here two of the Kamado Joe accessories. The Kamado Joe sear plate, which comes in at about 59 bucks US, or the Kamado Joe soapstone, which is $79, and my personal favorite, not just because of the sear, but this stone can also double as a pizza stone, so you can get pizza and amazing steaks all out of your Joe Jr. In terms of removing your ash, everything just collects down here and you're able to scoop that out using the included ash tool. So while there's a lot to love about the Kamado Joe Jr., let's cover off some of the cons. And so ever since the Series 2 Kamado Joe came out, there's been a bunch of new features that Kamado Joe has brought to the market, like the mesh high heat gasket, which is great for locking in any of that moisture and smoke and just helping make sure that you get the most out of your Kamado experience. They've also introduced new cooking gear like the slow roll or hyperbolic insert, which the Kamado Joe Kettle Joe has, and it comes on Series 3 grills like the Classic and the Big Joe, and it's also available as a standalone accessory for the older Series 1 and Series 2 Kamados. The new generation also has things like a charcoal basket as well as a control tower top that doesn't move like the daisy wheel does when you open and close your dome, and it also locks out weather. And so does the Joe Jr. come with any of this great goodies? Sadly, no, none of them are included. So I'm gonna go ahead and list that as a couple cons. We don't get the mesh gasket, we don't get a charcoal basket included, we don't get the control tower top or the slow roller. Plus, even though it is portable, it still is a little heavy, and you want to be careful. It is ceramic, so you just want to throw that in the back of the truck and start heading out to do a tailgate party somewhere. You want to handle that with a little bit of care. And Space is a factor. At 148 square inches, if you want to, cook pulled pork, absolutely, you can get 5 to 8 pounds on there, no problem. Ribs, you can get creative if you roll them, but you are just limited in space. And so here's a quick illustration of what a 14-pound Packer brisket, which is not that large in the world of Packer briskets, looks like on the Joe Jr. as a quick point of reference. Okay, let's do a quick overview of the Kamado Joe Kettle Joe. So this grill comes packed with a bunch of features that I was really excited about to see how they would perform in Kamado Joe's version of the kettle. And I'll start with the innovative approach to the firebox. So this solves two problems that usually plagues almost every other kettle on the market. One, they don't retain their heat very well, so they burn their charcoal and it makes long, low and slow cooks near impossible to do without just standing by the fire constantly adding more charcoal. And after I pulled off my first overnight brisket, I was impressed that the Kettle Joe actually helps solve this problem of being able to retain heat and run at a much, much longer time than any kettle I've ever used before. The other problem that it solves is high heat. Typically, you don't want to go above 500 degrees Fahrenheit in a normal kettle because you can crack your lower enameled base, but this allows the Kettle Joe to reach searing temperatures of up to 700 degrees Fahrenheit, and I've done that, and you get an amazing Maillard reaction on your steak or anything that's so lucky to be searing on the Kettle Joe. And so that is another great feature. The one that I think maybe had me the most excited, though, is what you see here, which is the slow roller hyperbolic insert on a kettle. And so that brisket and some ribs that I've done absolutely brings the best of Kamado Joe Series 3 to the kettle. And if we were just to go for food and taste alone, the Kettle Joe would be putting huge points on the board because it absolutely delivers in this regard. You also get a couple other things. You get your side shelves, which gives you some working space. The Joe Jr. doesn't have that. You've got an adjustable dome, so we can have the slow roller height or go in traditional kettle mode for that hotter, low, or hot and fast type cooking. And then it also has the ash tool system found on, the proper Kamados, where you pull out your ash and it's really easy to dump everything out. Whereas the Joe Jr., you got to do that a little bit more manually using your ash tool. Okay, let's talk cons of the Kettle Joe. So I'm going to start with a couple of things that are included on every other Kamado that I think should have been included with the Kettle Joe. The first and the obvious ones are the tools, like that grill gripper and the ash tool would have made a lot of sense. Otherwise, how are you supposed to move those hot cooking grids around and or rake your ashes from one side of the basket to the other? The other one, and maybe the most significant missing piece here, is a heat deflector plate. If you buy a Series 3 Classic or Big Joe, not only do you get the slow roller, which is great for low and slow cooking, you also get heat deflector plates, which can withstand much, much higher heat. And this poses a real challenge in the Kettle Joe if you're trying to do something like a reverse seared steak. The slow roller portion works really well at managing that indirect cook, but when it's time to go hot and fast, the slow roller is only rated for 500 degrees Fahrenheit, so you have to take it out. Can you store it on the shelves? No, it won't fit. And these are quite flimsy. Like, they're only rated, I think, for 15 to 20 pounds. So you wouldn't want to put the slow roller on that, even if it could hold it. It also doesn't fit underneath the cart. So you've got this hot accessory, usually with some food dripping some grease, and nowhere to put it. Speaking of dripping grease, the Kettle Joe also doesn't come with a gasket. And so if you're cooking anything with moisture, like that brisket I did with a water pan, or I did some Cornell chicken, which is marinated in a vinegar sauce and it has a lot of moisture, it puts off some humidity. That steam ends up accumulating and then running down the side of the grill, and in my case, all over the deck. And so I'm not looking forward to refinishing the deck. You're definitely going to want to have a bit of a grill protector pad underneath the Kettle Joe if you do put it on a deck or a nice stone surface. The other things that I think it should have had is a decision if it's going to be portable or not portable. One of the advantages of all kettles is that they're portable. Just throw them in the truck or the back of your car, head to the beach, and have a day of cooking. This is 121 pounds. So not only is it very heavy, nearly twice the weight of the Joe Jr., it's also not that flexible in terms of how you move it because it's screwed in to these legs. That's how it goes together in terms of assembling the cart. And so unless you have a pickup truck, this gets really difficult to fit in the back of a minivan or an SUV, where sometimes the lift gate doesn't open that tall in order to fit in the Kettle Joe. Even if you did want to manage the 121 pounds, you'll have some challenges getting it to fit places. And so that is a little bit weird to have, you know, things like a side shelf where you make some sacrifices for portability and take that more flimsy structure than what you get on the Classic 2 and 3, but not actually have it be a portable grill at all. And then the last con of the Kettle Joe here is just you miss out on all the other accessories. The soapstone, if you have one for the Big Joe, it's too big. It's, you know, for 24 inches, this is 22 inches, it doesn't fit. If you've already invested in a rotisserie, so the Jotisserie or the pizza accessory, the Dojo, neither of those fit because they come in 18-inch size for the Classic or 24-inch size for the Big Joe, and at 22 inches, we're sort of in no man's land where none of those accessories that you have will work on the Kettle Joe. Okay, so let's cover pros for each grill, the Kettle Joe and the Kamado Joe Jr. Let's start with the Joe Jr. So it's got a couple ticks here in the win column, starting with low price, $3.99. It's the lowest price grill in the Kamado Joe product lineup. It's also a proper ceramic Kamado, so all the benefits of ceramic cooking in terms of energy efficiency, heat retention, moisture, and keeping your food super moist. If you've never cooked on a Kamado grill before and you're just looking at this video or researching it, first thing you have to cook is just even start with a chicken, because it'll blow your mind away the amount of difference that moisture retention makes. The Joe Jr. packs all of that. And it also comes in a really premium feeling package. So everything from the cart to the components to the tools, there's nothing flimsy or, you know, feels inexpensive about it. It's a proper Kamado Joe in a very portable size package, and that is the final benefit here that actually matters. Is at 68 pounds you can actually take this places, which is a lot of fun of owning a Joe Jr. So let's cover a couple pros for the Kamado Joe Kettle Joe. And so, like the Joe Jr., this fires up to temperature really quick because it's not a ceramic Kamado. Is you can actually get up to temperatures despite a much larger grill in a very similar amount of time as the Kamado Joe Jr. itself, which before I had the Kettle Joe, it was my fastest, you know, grill to get up to temperature for those midweek family dinner cooks. Speaking of the grill size and space, is you have space. There's that old saying for muscle cars, there's no replacement for displacement, and that is absolutely true here for the Kamado Joe Kettle Joe. At 22 inches, it just swallows up a brisket, no problem, that I couldn't even dream of cooking on the Joe Jr. And maybe one of the most important factors in this is the taste of the food. And because it's not a ceramic Kamado, which is maybe a disadvantage, there is a bit of an advantage in the sense that that fire is burning all the time. And the food that I've done on this comes out more like it was cooked on an offset than maybe a traditional Kamado itself, because you've got that clean burning fire all the time. It's a lot more work to maintain that temperature and hold things in steady and add charcoal. But boy, oh boy, if you put in the work, does the food come out incredible. And at the end of the day, that's what a good grill is all about, is the quality of the food that it can put out. And so I'm gonna go ahead and give the Kettle Joe a couple thumbs up here on the taste of the food. And lastly is the flexibility. So while it doesn't change gears really well, it's performed great at low and slow temperatures like that brisket or ribs, and it's also done amazing at hot and fast inferno mode searing temperatures, 700 degrees. So a couple points for the Kettle Joe on low and slow and hot and fast, even though changing between the two is a little bit more difficult than any other Kamado Joe. Okay, conclusion time. I promised we would pick a winner, so let's go ahead through some of the scenarios where each grill might be the right one for you. And so if you happen to already be a Kamado Joe household and you're looking at adding a second grill, I would go for the Joe Jr. for a couple reasons. One, it's a weekday warrior, comes up to temperature really, really quick. It also is really nice having two completely different temperatures. So if you wanted to be, you know, searing away on the Joe Jr. as a bit of a sear station and had some other larger proteins going on either the Classic or the Big Joe, that is incredibly handy. Plus, it's portable, and so all the fun that you get cooking on your Kamado Joe, you can now take it places, and I cannot stress enough how enjoyable that is. If I'm in the camp of I don't have any grill and I'm looking at upping my grill game and I want to start and I'm just looking at the two, $3.99, $4.99, which one should I get? Well, the only way to answer this is depending on what you actually want to cook. If a brisket is ever in your future, or you're going to be doing it regularly, the Kettle Joe is really the only choice here because you're just getting that extra space. And then maybe I'll add a third scenario here too, which is what if you have a Kamado Joe already, but you have a second property, maybe a summer or winter cottage or something like that, that you're not at all the time? I would also go and lean towards the Kettle Joe for this scenario because it performs very similar to what you're used to, but it's a fraction of the cost and can turn out some large cooks, perfect for those cottage weekends where maybe you want to do a brisket, ribs, or things like that and feed a bunch of people. And so my overall winner, which one am I going to pick today? Well, I'm going to go with my old trusty Joe Jr. here. I think the Kettle Joe can absolutely take the crown. I think it needs a little bit more tweaking here in terms of adding a felt or a gasket to help cut down on the leaking. I think it should come with tools like the grill gripper or the ash pan or ash tool in order to move the coals from one side of the basket to the other, just like it's included on every other Kamado Joe, like the Classic or the Big Joe. And lastly, and most importantly, I think it should come at least with one half moon deflector. If these are all things that have been adjusted or corrected for the production model, I'll go ahead and pin that in the comments down below. But my pre-production model didn't have any of those things, and so today I'm crowning the Joe Jr. the champion of our best Kamado Joe for under 500 bucks. So if you like this video, don't forget to let YouTube know by smashing that thumbs up button down below, and let me know by hitting subscribe to catch future videos. In a future series, I'm actually going to be giving each of my Kamados a dedicated video and tell you a little bit more about the pros and cons of each one. And I'll do a complete family roundup in terms of all of them together. And if I could only pick one out of all of them, which one it would be. Make sure you have the bell's notification button turned on so you're alerted when that video comes out. Until next time though, I'm James from Smokin' Dad Barbecue signing off. Remember, don't be afraid to fire it up.